we're gonna start today with a really weird midrash brought by Rashi, and we're gonna end with hopefully a beautiful one. Just to let you know, you can tell me later if it was in fact beautiful. But we're starting with a midrash, a weird one brought by Rashi, partially in honor of the commentaries class that we started this past week. We did Rashi. Next week we're doing Ibn Ezra, so please join us on Thursday nights for the commentaries class. So when you were reading in the Parsha this morning, Pharaoh is speaking with his courtiers, and they are wondering what to do with all of the Israelites in their midst. They're worried that there's too many of them, that if a foreign power comes, they're going to rise up against them. And so they say, let us deal wisely with them. Nit chachma lo. Let us deal wisely. It should say lahem. Let us deal wisely with all of them. But it says lo, singular. The rabbis in the Midrash don't know what to do with this. It's a whole people. What does it mean? Now you could say that it's just that we're talking about the nation, so it's singular, but that's for the Ibn Ezra class on Thursday. This is Rashi. We're doing a different thing. So the rabbis in the Midrash imagine that Pharaoh and all of his courtiers are trying to figure out how they can get the Israelites without God getting back at them. Because they have a problem. They know, according to the rabbis, that Israel is the chosen of God and that God's going to get angry if they do something. So they try a bunch of different ideas. And they also know that God likes to punish people midah keneged midah, measure for measure. So they say, if we try to burn the Israelites, then God's going to burn us. If we try to kill the Israelites with the sword, then God's going to kill us with a sword. Till one, according to the rabbis, one of Pharaoh's advisors goes, aha, I've got it. Drowning. Because God promised to never drown the world again. This courtier apparently had read Bereshit. And God promised never to drown the world again. So if we drown the Israelites, then we've got God by God's own logic, and we'll be safe and we'll be fine. You can ask them how that worked out, right? And so the rabbis say that's why the whole thing ends with these with the Egyptians in the Red Sea. Because God gets the midah keneged midah, measure for measure. And this midrash is, to put it mildly, bizarre. We imagine that Pharaoh and his advisors not only do they know Genesis, they know God, but they're also sort of willing to it's like a yeshiva. They're engaging in this Talmudic logic of how they can, get the Israelites with impunity. And what I think is going on with this midrash are the rabbis searching for some measure of comfort in this sort of worst of moments in Israelite history. Because if the Egyptians, even if they're our enemies, sort of still work within our system, they speak our language, they know that God is God and they're just trying to, get one up on God, it makes the world seem like a safer and less scary place than if they're just wicked people out there that have nothing to do with us at all. Because this moment in the Parsha that we read this morning in the beginning of the book of Shemot, we get about 4 verses after Pharaoh says we're going to deal harshly with them, that talk about the hardships that we suffered in Egypt. Right? We get about, again, it just says we set taskmasters over them to oppress them with forced labors. The more they were oppressed, the more they increased. And then we have the Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites various labors that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made the life bitter for them with harsh labor. And that is all we get from the Torah itself about how bad things were in Egypt. Those 4 lines, it was bad, Pharaoh was mean, it was ruthless, there was hard labor. And from that moment is the trauma that will basically set Israelites and Jews up that we hold on to for thousands and thousands of years. Right? We live our lives today with the inherited trauma of Egypt and a lot of things that happened since Egypt. But that is the beginning for us and our narrative of thinking of ourselves as a downtrodden people, a people who have been oppressed, a people who have been enslaved, a people who have gotten out of that. And that narrative stays with us because trauma stays with us. Trauma is something that we pass on from generation to generation. This is way over my skis, but apparently genetically, we literally pass on trauma in our DNA to the next generation. Ask someone else about that. And trauma that we have, whether it's trauma we have felt ourselves or that we have inherited, can push us in different directions. Trauma can lead us to push ourselves to be better. Right? We say, because we were slaves in the land of Egypt, you need to look out for the stranger among you, right? 36 times in the Torah we say that. There are places where we use our trauma to teach us lessons to be better people. And there's also trauma that can lead us into bad places. It can silence us. When we're in a moment of trauma, we can't take in new information. We can't learn new things. We lose any kind of growth mindset we might have had, right? We can't think about the future. We can only think about how to get out, how to escape from what's going on right now. And trauma can then lead us to anger, to hatred, to decisions we wish that we wouldn't have made. And we as a people collectively have this trauma. It's right there, even for those of us who live in, I think I've said this 100 times already, right? In the greatest time, the greatest place, it's the best that it's ever been to be a Jew right here in Wynwood in 2025, right? Without a doubt, that's a fact. And you can talk about the golden age of Spain another time, Rabbi, but it's whether we live here or then, the idea that this could all go away is right there below the surface for all of us. This fear of what is going to happen in our world. And because that's our narrative, it means that we could have 100 good things happen to our people, and we think, this is great, but don't get too comfortable. And we have bad things happen, and we're right back to name your moment of trauma in the Jewish past, and that's where we are, and that's what we think this is. And that is something that we come by honestly, and we inherit it, and we're not alone in that, because what we are dealing with in our world today is not only our own intergenerational inherited trauma, but it's bumping up against the inherited intergenerational trauma of other people around us. Now, we're in an amazing, please God, moment right now. So in the first chapter of Shemot, we watch the trauma happening. Hopefully, tomorrow, we are going to watch and feel the trauma lessening. Please God, as violence ends, as hostages are returned, please God, we will know a little bit of a deep breath that we haven't known for a year. But we know that it's not at the end. And if you listen to any Israeli media, if you read it, right, this is a happy, it's a joyous moment, but it's not quite the dancing in the streets just yet. It's a deep breath, and then we're worried about what's going to happen in the future. And we need the deep breath because we have to cease the trauma before we can start dealing with the trauma. But it's real, and it's real for us. And it's real for them. And we have to acknowledge in our world today the trauma that we feel as well as the trauma that others feel. And there's very real trauma for people in Gaza. It's real, and it's intergenerational, and we have to acknowledge it. And there's very real trauma in the people around us. Today, as we have our weekend honoring Martin Luther King Jr., we have to think about the inherited racial trauma in America. It's real. And we as Jews have been on every side of it. We have been oppressed alongside. We have been part of the oppressors. We have been tangentially connected or disconnected, but it's real and it's there. And we can't move forward in America without acknowledging it. And it's so shared, some of these visions, that I imagine, and when I read those 4 verses about what life was like in Egypt and how bad it was, I'm wondering, but I imagine that everyone's brain was filling in the images of, Prince of Egypt, Cecil B. DeMille, whatever it is, which are images of what? Lions and taskmasters with whips, and they're completely borrowed from American slavery in the South. We don't know what slavery looked like in Egypt, so our minds imagine what slavery looked like here. Because we share our trauma, we speak to one another, and we have to be able to find a shared language, like the hope of the rabbis in that midrash, so that we can talk to one another about our traumas. And as we pass on the trauma in the Parsha, we also pass on hope. There's a midrash that points out that when Joseph passes away, Joseph gathers his family to him, and he says that I'm about to die, but God will surely take notice of you. Pakod yifaked, right? Pakod yifkod, sorry. That God will take notice of you and bring you up out of this land. And so Joseph makes his family promise that when that happens, when God has taken notice of you, again, pakod yifkod, you shall surely take notice of you, that you shall carry my bones out of here. And in this moment, it seems like Joseph, either because of his gift of foresight or maybe through reading the political landscape of Egypt, he knew what was going to happen. He knew what was going to happen to his family, that he, unlike his father, who's given a great burial back in the land, he's not going to get that. And that his children and his children's children, things aren't going to go well for them. And so he tells them this, that God will remember them and that they should remember him, both to be meant for hope as well as a charge. You will get out of here, but don't forget my bones when you do. And his words, specifically the repetition of pakod, a word which means to take note of or to know, is the key to our redemption. As in our Parsha today, when Moses shows up and God is giving Moses the charge to, you're going to go set these people free. He says, go and assemble the elders of Israel and say to them that God, the God of your fathers, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, has appeared to me and said, I have taken note of you. Pakod pakadati. So Moses shows up to the people. He repeats God's words. And this is the moment that they know that Moshe is for real, because he echoes Joseph's words of prophecy. And according to the Midrash, there's one person who's still alive from that original generation of the patriarchs and matriarchs, Serach bat Asher, Asher's daughter Sarah. She's still alive, and she remembers the Joseph moment. And so the elders of Israel come to her and they say, this guy named Moses showed up, and he told us to follow him and that he's going to save us and that God is remembering. Like, this is weird, right? We shouldn't do this. And it seems like magic. And she says, well, what did he say to you? And they repeat the words. And when she hears pakod pakadati, she says, no, he's for real. Because that's what Joseph said was going to happen. Someone was going to remember us and take note of us and see us. And that means that Moses is the true Redeemer. All because he spoke the words, I will take note. So we all carry with us this inherited trauma. We have no choice. It's in our DNA. But we also carry the secret to redemption, the password of memory. I will remember you if you will remember me. I will take note of you, pakod, if you will try to know me. There's a lot of talk in the world about what it means to be seen. I've given entire Rosh Hashanah sermons about Buber and wanting to be seen. What does it mean that we want to be seen? We want to be validated in who we are. We want to know that our experience of the world isn't wrong, that we aren't mistaken in the narrative that we create about our lives. The promise that God will take note of Israel comes with physical and tangible benefits, to be sure, freedom and exodus from Egypt, but it is also a spiritual benefit. God will not leave you. Even in your pain, God sees you. Pakod yifkod, you will be known. And this is what we Jews are asking for in the world today. To be known. Notice us and our trauma. Notice the anti-Semitism around us and the hatred that's focused on us. Our narrative isn't wrong, and we need it to be acknowledged. And we surely owe it to others to take note of their pain and trauma as well. The trauma of those in Gaza trying to stay safe and alive, we can't ignore. We have suffered this year, for sure, and we have also caused suffering too. The pains, the fears, the complications of that conflict, the pains, the fears, the complications of racism in our country. Surely we have to take note of it if we're to fix any of it. Now, there's much work to be done to heal the wounds of our past and the wounds still very fresh on the body of our people. There is much to be done to heal the wounds and the scars of the people around us. I have no claims to know what the best path forward is, what details it should be, or what it should entail. But I know that the path of redemption starts pakod yifkod, with the taking note of the plight and suffering of others. Shabbat Shalom.